Hi guys, so after watching and reviewing the original Zombie Diaries the other day, I was absolutely up for coming back and covering the second film. But before we dive into it, we've got to address the elephant in the room here and talk about the title of this film, World of the Dead, The Zombie Diaries 2. Just a terrible, terrible title for this sequel. If you haven't seen this, I can tell you right now, this film does not expand its geography to encompass the entire world. We are still very much stuck in a very small portion of England. Okay, so we've expanded a little bit. So the first movie took place entirely in a little portion of Hertfordshire. In this film, a lot of the characters have to go on this journey towards the East Coast. So I guess we start in Hertfordshire, but then we have to pass through maybe Essex and Suffolk. So, okay, maybe there's 3 counties in this film within England, but we're not going outside England or going anywhere around the rest of the world. So yeah, this is probably the worst case of advertising for a film since Jason Takes Manhattan or Critters 3 with its poster of big city buildings, but the film didn't take place in a city at all. This one was directed by Michael Bartlett, again, 5 years on from his first film, and the narrative structure he's gone for this time is a little bit different. So in my review for the first film, I said that the Zombie Diaries was like the Pulp Fiction of zombie films, because you had like 3 or 4 different stories, all kind of tenuously linked together. Some of those stories were played out of chronological order, but this time around, it's just a straight shot. It's one story. All the scenes are played in order. So I guess you could call this maybe the Jackie Brown of zombie films, but that's probably the last time today I will think to compare those 2 movies. So in terms of storyline, in terms of story, we've got Leanne returning from the previous film. Not a character we got to know that well from the original, because she was only in one of the 3 or 4 stories, and she wasn't even the main character in her own story, really, but she was left alive at the end. So she is back in this one. At the beginning, she's picked up by the army and taken to like an army camp, and it seems like she's safe at first because this camp has good fences around the outside and the soldiers all seem to be on a level. But it can't last, because this is a horror film. Something bad's got to happen. So one night, the zombies get in somehow. It's never really explained. Somehow the zombies are just swarming the camp. And most of the people in this camp die, but a small group of soldiers manage to make it out along with Leanne, probably like 5 or 6. So they are then in a kind of fight for survival just in the wilderness. They're living hand to mouth. But they hear on the radio that there are a couple of boats leaving the East Coast, going to like Holland or something. So this is a golden chance to escape the hell pit that is the UK right now. So they head out for the coast. So this film quickly becomes a kind of ticking time bomb sort of a film, because not only are these characters in danger of missing the boat, but they also find out that England is going to be firebombed, a little bit like what happens at the end of 28 Weeks Later. So it's a desperate rush for the coast. But of course, between them and the coast are hordes of zombies, and also a malicious group of bandits led by Gokey, that psychopath/rapist from the first film. So, of course, Leanne and Gokey are seemingly on a collision course to once again meet again in this sequel. I've got mixed feelings about the return of Gokey in this. So, on the one hand, yes, it's cool to see him come back, but he's just not the same villain as he was in the first film. Part of the fun of him in the original was the way that he would sort of integrate himself with good people and then suddenly flip on a dime, start murdering, raping. This time around, he doesn't do any of that. He's just a very one-dimensional, almost gangster type figure from the minute that he turns up. If this was the character's first appearance in any of these films, I would say that he was a very, very unremarkable entity within the story. On the positive side, at least the presence of Gokey and Manny is not overdone in this sequel. You know, even though we don't get 3 or 4 stories like we did in the first film, there's still a very clear sort of 3-act structure in this sequel. So to begin with, we've got Act 1, the soldiers' camp and the escape from there. And then we've got Act 2, the skirmishes with the bandits, which can be quite fun, fair enough. And the third act, the final, last, desperate push for the coast and the climax that happens there. So at least Gokey and Mane, if they're going to be used in this fairly uninspired way, at least they are confined to just one of the three very distinct sections of the movie. But one problem I had when the soldiers come up against the bandits in this, so we've got roughly 6 soldiers and we've got roughly 6 bandits, equal numbers, and yet it always seems in this like the bandits come out on top. The soldiers should be much better trained, and they seem to have better weapons like M16s and stuff. The bandits have got like handguns and shotguns and things, but it's a little bit of a problem for me that the soldiers always seem to lose in any conflict with the bandits, because there's 2 or 3 little mini battles and comings together, but the bandits always come out on top. Like at one point, like all the soldiers are tied up and the bandits have barely lost 1 man. I think what they should have done is maybe have the bandits be maybe 12 in number instead of 6, and then it would have been a little bit more believable. It's a little bit weird that Gokey gets away in this again at the end. I mean, what were they hoping for, a third film maybe? Maybe Solar System of the Dead, the Zombie Diaries 3? I've got mixed feelings about the fact that we never get to see Gokey die. It's, on the one hand, it's sort of cool that there's a villain in 2 films and he gets to retire undefeated from the whole thing, but at the same time, I would have loved to have seen him get his Captain Rhodes moment and just get his insides chewed up, you know, right in front of us through the camera, watch the whole thing, get him, let us get to see him get his comeuppance. There is an absolutely terrible scene in the bandits section of the film, by the way. It's absolutely the worst thing about this whole film. So there's a scene where one of the female soldiers gets captured and she's tied down, and Mane is trying to persuade this teenager. He's a little bit mentally challenged, this guy, and he's trying to persuade this lad to basically rape this woman, and it's just a horrible, vile scene to watch. It goes on for so long. It's not just the fact that we're getting to see this woman in such a horrible situation, having bad things done to her, but also the mental manipulation of this teen, young adult. It's bad to watch, honestly. It's the one thing in this film that really lets the film down. I just think it was completely unnecessary. We already know from the first film what Gokey and Mane are all about and the types of things that would likely go on in a group, a large group run by Gokey. I liked how they did this kind of thing in the first movie. You know, we'd see women sort of tied up from time to time naked, but we can guess what happened to them. Actually showing us some of the really vile stuff that goes on this time around. Not necessary for me. Our protagonists in this are fairly good, actually. I liked them a lot. We get to know them quite well throughout the story as well. So when the inevitable deaths do happen at various junctures, they are quite impactful deaths for me. There's only one of these 6 characters or so that I didn't really like. The best of the bunch is a guy, I think his name is Nicholson. I could be wrong about that, but weirdly enough, he's a character we get to see probably the least, because he's initially left back at the army camp and everyone thinks he's dead. And then later on, he turns up again. But this, for me, would be the second misstep on behalf of the writers of this film after the rape scene, because Nicholson, if that is indeed his name, he should have been with the main characters all the way through. He's a great character. I love his sort of no-nonsense approach to things. He's ace. Leanne, bless her, there's a moment where she tries to shoot a bandit like 100 yards away, but with a shotgun. It's not the smartest choice, though I guess a civilian, she's not had weapons training. As Lance Henriksen might have said in Hard Target, totally the wrong tool for the job. There are lots of great battles with the zombies in this. I'd say the stuff with the zombies is much better than the stuff with the bandits, whereas in the first film, the stuff with Gokey was more interesting and creepy than anything to do with the actual zombies who were walking around. It's flipped this time around. But yeah, there's so many great skirmishes, like the scene where the characters initially leave the army camp. That's a brilliantly intimidating set of circumstances where it's almost pitch black and you've got loads of zombies, dozens of them, all coming into the gates, and some of the soldiers are looking around in that kind of night vision technology that's all green. Later on, you get a change of visual where we're watching skirmishes with the zombies, but in like snowy woodlands. So that again gives you more different visuals, and There's a scene in the dark where characters have got to go down to this cellar that's quite creepy, and it's got a nice build up. So yeah, there's lots of exciting stuff that feels different. You got lots of different things to look at in this movie. On the downside, I'm not entirely sure that you can walk 2 days from Hertfordshire to the East Coast. In reality, I think it would take a lot longer than that. But the writers don't really mention anywhere by name other than Hertfordshire, the starting point. I don't think they envisaged, or shall we say, they didn't want people like me getting on a map after the film trying to work out if people could actually make it to the coast from Hertfordshire in 2 days. I don't think it's possible personally, unless the coast in this case is that little bit that's just up near King's Lynn. Maybe if you travel from Hertfordshire north east, it's a shorter distance to water, possibly, but it's not worth dwelling on for too long. I like the fact that there are lots and lots of extras being zombies in this film. At times it feels like they've really put like maybe over 100 people in the same shot at times. There are lots of wide open spaces used in this film, but there are definitely more zombies in this one than the original film, although at times there still aren't enough zombies because the spaces they're using are so large. There were moments where, even though I could see like 100 zombies on the screen, I still felt like they moved sufficiently slow enough that the characters could easily really have dodged them without having to engage them. But I guess just to make the film more exciting, and they still have the characters like blowing heads off and stuff like that. On the whole, this film, I'd say it's up to the standard of the first one, but it definitely feels very different. The first one is more of an artistic endeavor. It's creepy more than it is full of good action. This second one, it kind of tries to be a lower scale version of 28 Weeks Later in and of itself, a second film of a franchise. You've got the firebombing here, the threat of the firebombing at least, and like a mad dash to get somewhere. There's definitely an attempt here to be more of a fast-paced film with more action happening. It's like Bartlett and whoever did the writing had the 5 years to reflect on the first film and decided that maybe the first film was a little bit ponderous at times. It didn't really, do all that much. This time around, they've definitely tried to get a more exciting, fast-paced sort of a vibe. But given that this one does have some glaring weaknesses that I don't like the rape scene and one or two other things, I think overall the two films are more or less side by side in the quality stakes. So I'll quickly show you my version of the Zombie Diaries 2. Here it is, or should I say World of the Dead, the Zombie Diaries 2. The picture on here is as bad as the title. You've got this massive city landscape with like thousands of zombies. I mean, come on. It does have some features, this disc, though. A behind-the-scenes look at the gory details of World of the Dead in production with exclusive cast and crew interviews. There's also a audio commentary done by the director. I must admit, I've not checked out any of the features on this like I did with the first movie. And it's not that I even like this movie any less, really. I think that they're both pretty decent. I'd say if you're into zombie films, these two movies are worth checking out. They are definitely above average in this genre. They're not like brilliant classics, they're not some of the best zombie films ever made, but they are still above average. And if I was watching a review like this, I would certainly be interested to know that, because if something is above average for me, then it's definitely worth checking out. But for now, let's get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give this film. So we got 1, 2, 3, 3.5 bloody axes out of 5. That is the exact same score I gave the first film, I believe. So there ends my look at the world of the Zombie Diaries. There are only 2 films to get through. I think after this, I'm going to move on and do some more zombie stuff, and in particular, the George Romero films. So I'm looking forward to that. I've not checked those out in a while. So I guess I will be starting very soon with Night of the Living Dead and then progressing in order. But for now, until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.